My goodness, what presence and confidence all of these students have. Thank you so much for joining us and all the parents too. I am thrilled to introduce Kevin Grant. He's our speaker this morning and he already becomes highly recommended. Kevin Grant is the superintendent for Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary. Prior to his appointment as superintendent in February of 2022, Kevin spent the last 14 years of his career as a deputy superintendent with more than 9 years at the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary and 4 years at the Sanctuary of American Samoa. He has a master's degree in marine affairs from the University of Washington and a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Wisconsin. He was a NOS C. Grant Fellow at the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and served 2 years in the Peace Corps in the Solomon Islands. Nearly all of his experience since leaving graduate school has involved collaboration in resource management with indigenous communities. And I learned this morning that he's going on a special trip this summer to Scotland and that some of our other members too. So we are well-traveled and you are, and we're thrilled to benefit from your experience. Come on up. Kevin Grant.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I liked the opening of the meeting today, and I'm truly grateful that I was invited to speak to you today about what I do and this amazing place that we have just off our coast here. Next slide. I have been working for the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. They're part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, for about 20 years. Other parts of NOAA deal with fisheries. There's the National Weather Service. I work for the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. I started at the headquarters in DC, spent 4 or 5 years in Hawaii. I spent 4 years in American Samoa, and we've been here since 2012. Next. So last year was the 50th anniversary of when the U.S. ushered in basically a new era of protections for the oceans by creating what is now known as the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. Since then, we've grown into a network of 15 national marine sanctuaries. There are actually 6 in the process of being designated right now. And we include 2 marine national monuments in our system. Together, the current ones, not including the 6 new ones, protect 620,000 square miles of marine and Great Lakes waters. I personally think Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary is the crown jewel in that system. Sanctuaries are special places that they're host to beautiful and important ecosystems and species, etc. But they also support coastal communities and help drive local economies by providing opportunities for people to explore and recreate and form lifelong connections with these spectacular places. So as I mentioned, a little more than 50 years ago, Congress passed the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. An innovative part of that act at the time was that it advanced a vision of encouraging local communities in the efforts to protect and conserve the country's really iconic marine and Great Lakes places, while allowing for human uses that are compatible with the goals of each sanctuary. And I often get a question because the term sanctuary implies, for the most part, an area that's kind of fenced off, nobody can go there, there's no extraction, things like that. And that is not what national marine sanctuaries are. We actually want to encourage people to go out there and to do these things. You can see this bulleted list. This is kind of the heart and soul of what a national marine sanctuary is. But I want to highlight the first one, promoting long-term conservation while allowing compatible uses. Well, what's a compatible use? We want people to go out and enjoy these areas without spoiling them, basically. And the best example I have, this is a real life example. There is fishing allowed, commercial, recreational, whatever, in every single national marine sanctuary, every one. Now, some of them have areas set aside within the sanctuary that are just for scientific study, or you can't fish there, you can't take anything out of it. That's not the case with Olympic Coast. We don't have any areas that are off limits to fishing. We consider that a compatible use as long as it's done in a responsible manner. When I was in American Samoa, we had to deal with somebody. There was an individual who was fishing with dynamite. We decided very quickly that that was not a compatible use. Next, please. So Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary, it's off the coast of the peninsula here, and it starts just west of the actual bay of Neah Bay and goes down to the Copalis River. It's about 135 miles of shoreline, and it's some of the last wilderness shoreline in the United States. It's located within the usual and accustomed areas of 4 coastal treaty tribes. It was established because this area is extremely productive. It's a very productive ecosystem. There's lots of fisheries. There are a lot of cultural resources, and so it was established in 1994. Most of the sanctuary is in the continental shelf, basically 200 meters or less of water, but we do include the heads of a bunch of canyons, and part of the sanctuary is actually about 1,500 meters or 5,000 feet deep. So this is the mission of Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary. I don't know if you can all read that, but it's to protect the Olympic Coast's natural and cultural resources through responsible stewardship, to conduct and apply research to preserve the area's ecological integrity and maritime heritage, and to promote understanding through public outreach and education. Again, we focus on promoting long-term conservation while allowing people to get out there and enjoy and know these places. Protecting ecosystems and promoting sustainability and engaging the public in protecting these places. So I've mentioned a few times how marine sanctuaries actively seek public involvement in the management of these areas. And one of the ways that we do that is we have a sanctuary advisory council. It's made up of, we label them seats, representatives of different user groups. So we have an education seat, we have a research seat, we have a conservation seat. We have 2 fishing seats. We have representatives of the Navy and the Coast Guard and other federal agencies. And we use these as basically a two-way street. So it's my job when we have meetings of the advisory council to present what is new, exciting, important going on with the sanctuary from our perspective. And then it's the job of the advisory council members to take that information back to their constituents. So the education people take it to teachers and education groups that they're with, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's also their job to get information. There might be new issues, there might be new opportunities that they know of, and they can bring that back to the body and share it with the sanctuary and each other. And it's a really effective way to include as much community input into the management of this area. We work with 4 coastal treaty tribes from south to north. This includes the Quinault Indian Nation, the Ho tribe, the Quileute tribe, and the Makah tribe. These 4 tribes they signed treaties in the mid-1800s. Article 6, Section 2 of the United States Constitution says that treaties shall be the supreme law of the land. That is commonly known as the supremacy clause of the Constitution. And Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary supports the tribe's ability to exercise these treaty protected rights. We formed a different body similar to our Sanctuary Advisory Council, but with only the state of Washington and the 4 tribes in the sanctuary. It's called the Intergovernmental Policy Council. It was the first of its kind in the nation. And it basically established a forum for the coastal treaty tribes and the state to engage the sanctuary in identifying and evaluating these emergent issues, opportunities, and to be able to coordinate and collaborate on resource management efforts on the Olympic coast. So this is kind of my day-to-day job. Research and monitoring, resource protection, education and outreach. I often say that these form the legs, the 3-legged stool that supports sanctuary management. By the way, this is a photo of our 52-foot research vessel. It's about 2 years old now. It is home ported here in the marina at Port Angeles, but in the summer, you'll find it out at the Quileute Marina in La Push because that's much closer to the work we do.
We had a chance to tour it. Our club did.
That's fantastic. So these images are just a taste of what we do in the research and monitoring realm. So the top left shows an online data portal. You can go on there and click on these things, and we serve up all the underwater sounds that we've collected in a project we have with the Navy, and we started doing this to see how much noise is out there and how it may affect marine life, marine mammals in particular. The lower left is staff conducting intertidal habitat monitoring. So we go out every year a couple of times, and when the tide goes out, we put out transects and we monitor what's there, how it changes over time, things like that. The map at the center shows the location of our long-term monitoring buoys. So those black dots represent 10 moorings that we put out seasonally every year. And we measure different parameters of the water, like dissolved oxygen, temperature, conductivity, things like that. It's the oldest data set on the outer coast of Washington, other than traditional ecological knowledge. It's the oldest Western science data set. And it's really proven to be critical in documenting changes in the ocean conditions, like the marine heat waves that we've had recently, or declining oxygen levels in the ocean that can make it hard for marine species to survive, much less thrive. Resource protection, it's another robust program area for us. We have regulations to prevent disturbing wildlife. For example, we have a regulation, it's on the FAA charts. It's against our regulations to fly lower than 2,000 feet within a mile of shore. And that's because of those offshore islands that are really important nesting areas for seabirds, and marine mammals haul out and sun themselves and take a break and things like that. And when planes are lower than that, they disturb the wildlife. They scare it and flush birds off their nests that are then predated by other birds or rats or whatever. So we've got regulations to prevent that. We have regulations to address water quality issues. We prohibit all discharges from cruise ships. We have discharge regulations from other vessels, things like that. We have programs to protect sanctuary resources from oil or hazardous material. That little kind of magenta area off the coast is on nautical charts. It's legally designated as an area to be avoided. And it advises the operators of all vessels carrying oil or hazardous materials, or any ships 400 gross tons or above to maintain a 25-mile buffer from the coast. That in and of itself is not going to prevent some sort of oil spill or something like that. But it does provide a lot more time for rescue tugs and things like that to get out there and help or assist a vessel in need before it becomes catastrophic. And we partner with all sorts of organizations, including Washington Coast Savers, to help address the issue of marine debris. We have organized marine debris cleanups efforts a couple of times a year, and basically try and recruit volunteers to help remove debris from Washington's coast. And education and outreach programs, we have ocean science for coastal kids. We do programming in the schools here in Port Angeles, in schools out on the outer coast. One of our biggest draws is something we've named Big Mama. It is quite literally a life-sized inflatable humpback whale that the kids can walk inside. And we have all sorts of education programming around whales, sound, their habitats, what they do, any sort of threats to them, that kind of stuff. It's called Big Mama. There is quite literally a female humpback whale that travels through this area regularly. She's had a lot of calves with her over the years. Scientists can look at the tail pattern, it's kind of like a fingerprint, and know exactly which whale is which. And scientists dubbed her Big Mama because she's relatively large and always has kids. So our whale is literally modeled after her. The tail print on the bottom of our big blow up thing is kind of a fingerprint match to Big Mama. The bottom line is all of our education and outreach efforts strive to reach students, teachers, community members of all ages so that we can improve ocean literacy and kind of catalyze positive change in our communities when it comes to the marine environment. We are currently undergoing a review of our management plan. That's kind of like our guiding document. There are a lot of changing ocean conditions. There are a lot of things that come up, and we need to be able to address those as they happen, as they arise. And it's not all bad things. There are opportunities that come up, and we need to be able to take advantage of those too. We had a bunch of public meetings a year ago this month, gathered a bunch of information. We're in the process of incorporating those comments and coming up with a new draft of our management plan. Hopefully that will come out within about 12 months. It will also go out to the public so you guys can have a look, say, did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? How can we tweak it, make it better? Next. And along the lines of education and outreach, I would be remiss if I did not bring up one of our priorities for the sanctuary. In collaboration with Faro Marine Life Center, we are working diligently to develop a new marine discovery center on the Port Angeles waterfront. It will be kind of across from the healthcare center near Field Hall. We've been working on this for literally years, a decade. We have professionals that have done feasibility studies looking at the marketing piece. We have an interpretive plan. It's really important to us. The Faro Marine Life Center is very iconic and special to this community. But our missions, I've always considered them a Venn diagram. That's where the things overlap. So if our mission, which is the outer coast and out into the deep sea, is that green bubble, or excuse me, a yellow bubble, and Faro's is from the mountains and all of the watersheds out to the straits, and they're kind of the blue bubble. You overlap our missions. There's a lot of green in that area. And this Marine Discovery Center is going to focus on that while still allowing Faro to tell some of their specific stories and us to tell some of our specific stories. And it's not just about the environment itself. I mentioned earlier that sanctuaries pride themselves in helping local communities. There are over 3 million visitors to the park. There are over 350,000 people come off the Coho every year, that kind of thing. We hope that this helps keep them in Port Angeles just for one extra night. And there are extreme benefits to the community to that through the hotels and extra lodging tax and the restaurants and things like that. And so we want this to be a draw to Port Angeles. It's not just about the visitors. I have a daughter she's a freshman now. And she participated in one of the Faro's summer camps when she was young. And it was a camp that they designed and built and operated their own ROVs, remotely operated vehicles. And they tested them out in the tanks at Faro and this and that. And then they have a kind of a fun competition at the end. And this one that my daughter participated in was at the Red Lion pool. And they set up an obstacle course and the kids have to navigate the course and things like that. And my daughter, who is extremely competitive, was not thrilled with the results of her team in the competition. It was probably 6 years later, sitting around the dinner table, my younger daughter, who's a sixth grader, again, I don't know where the time goes, was asking me about buoyancy. And I explained, well, salt water is more dense, so things are more buoyant. They're going to float more than in fresh water. And my other daughter slammed her hand on the table. I mean, it startled me. I was like, what is going on? And she said, that's why. Like, what are you talking about? And she then explained 6 years later, she had this epiphany that when they set up their ROV, they tested it in the saltwater tanks at Faro. And when they ran the competition, it was in a freshwater pool and her ROV kept sinking to the bottom. And she was just disappointed. And 6 years later, she realized why. And it's those kind of stories that the Marine Discovery Center will help facilitate. I would encourage you to reach out to, what were you, how did you introduce yourself? As a freelancer? Melissa Williams, the executive director of Faro. I don't want to overstep and get too far down into what the Discovery Center is, but I can tell you what it's going to be, and that's awesome. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. Let's start.
Priority. When we actually, some of us visited the research vessel and we talked with Haley and we were asking about priorities from her perspective, because she's basically driven by what comes through your advisory council and from NOAA. Can you tell us how those priorities have changed, say, in the last decade and where you're going to go in the future?
Yes. In regards specifically to the research area, the management plan we're currently operating on was finalized in 2011. As I mentioned, we're updating that. A brand new one will come out. They're basically 10-year documents that we review in every 5 years kind of thing. Things like marine heat wave, that term didn't exist when our other management plan was developed. Hypoxia, that's a lack of oxygen in the water. It happens every summer due to natural processes. but it's becoming more prevalent. It's starting earlier in the season, it's lasting longer in the season, and the geographic scope of this hypoxic area is growing. And the reason that's concerning is because we don't know anything that can live without oxygen. So as soon as our research vessel and those oceanographic buoys I talked about detect hypoxia, we call the state, we call all the fishermen, we tell our fishing reps on the advisory council, we call all the tribes, and we let them know that it's starting, we see it, we're figuring out the geographic scope, and that way they can go move their crab pots. You know, you pull up a pot full of dead crab, that's useless to everyone. Fish can usually sense that, they swim out of the area, so there's no fish in the area, at least at the bottom, because there's no oxygen. But crab, if they're stuck in a pot, they're dead. The biggest thing that we are facing, in my opinion, right now is ocean acidification. The outer coast of Washington is kind of the canary in the coal mine. We are seeing the effects here that probably won't be seen in other places for decades. And that's mostly due to natural causes. The reason we're so, this environment is so productive is because every summer, cold water is upwelled from those deep canyons up onto the continental shelf. This is why I love my job. So nature's amazing. When that cold water is upwelled, it's much more nutrient rich. And because of that nutrients, you get a phytoplankton bloom, little tiny plants. Then you get a zooplankton bloom, little tiny animals that eat the little tiny plants, and so on and so forth up the food chain. And the whiting or the sardines or things like that that migrate through, they set their timing so that when they get off our coast, that's the time that this upwelling has occurred, and now they have a lot to eat. And then the whales come through, or the birds have their nesting patterns and times so that when the chicks hatch is when all of this other food is there. It's all set up. That process has the potential to be interrupted. And ocean acidification is a big problem. That cold water that also brings up the nutrients is naturally more acidic. And when I say ocean acidification, it's not going to get to the point where you touch the ocean and it burns you. But acidification has a real, very strong impact, negative impact on anything with a shell. The increasingly acidified waters are not going to dissolve an adult Dungeness crab or an adult oyster shell. However, when those things reproduce at one point in their life stage, you have to have a microscope to see them. And the increasingly acidified waters can affect them at that life stage. We're working to study it as much as we can, working with larger organizations on how to address it. It's really difficult to address a global problem on a local scale, but we're doing the best we can.
What is the potential and the possibility for offshore energy production, whether it be wave or wind or maybe something else within the sanctuary?
The National Marine Sanctuary has an official position on offshore energy. And that is that as a conservation organization, and science organization, we recognize a need to diversify the nation's energy, sources. But what we don't want is anyone to test new technologies in a national marine sanctuary. I can tell you, BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, has the ability to lease areas of the continental shelf for energy production, alternative energy production. The act that gave them that authority specifically exempts or prohibits them from offering leases in national marine sanctuaries. So the giant wind farms cannot be leased in a national marine sanctuary. We are not inherently against it. And in fact, it's not officially prohibited. So we have regulations against disturbing the bottom, the seabed. They could apply for a permit to anchor these things in the sanctuary. However, from what we've heard, the industry can't get funding because my permit is only for 5 years and then they have to reapply and renew. And they don't want to invest billions of dollars. And then in 5 years, we find out, yeah, we're not going to renew that. So they don't have any desire to place these in national marine sanctuaries. Outside of national marine sanctuaries, we don't really have any authority.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Great, and so if you could help us pick the winning raffle ticket today.
Ooh,
No,
I want this one,
okay,
this one.
the last three are 139. Woohoo, Grant, come on down.